Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight.
Pressure is the whole game they're both playing with each other.
What a potential rail strike could mean for passengers and for packages.
I envision a Chicago that leads the way in our fight against climate change.
Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia launches his second campaign for Chicago mayor. He joins us one-on-one.
For me, the hours come for a new generation to lead the Democratic caucus.
DACA urgency, Ukraine, gun control, and more. Local members of Congress break down priorities on Capitol Hill.
Nosotros duramos 10 días en la selva porque veníamos en un grupo de los rezagados que estaban las mujeres embarazadas.
Hundreds of asylum seekers are now calling Chicago home. Joanna Hernandez shares some of their stories.
A dry shampoo recall over the possible presence of a cancer-causing chemical. What you need to know.
And food pantries say both costs and demand are on the rise. 3 local pantries on how they're managing.
But first, some of today's top stories. President Joe Biden is again extending the pause on federal student loan payments. The extension comes after the Biden administration's broader student loan forgiveness program was blocked by a federal appeals court last week amid legal challenges. President Biden took to Twitter to say he's convinced the loan forgiveness plan is legal, and he announced the extension of the payment pause.
We're not going to back down, though, in our fight to give families breathing room. That's why the Department of Justice is asking the Supreme Court of the United States to rule on the case. But it isn't fair to ask tens of millions of borrowers eligible for relief to resume their student debt payments while the courts consider the lawsuit. For that reason, the Secretary of Education is extending the pause on student loan payments while we seek relief from the courts, but no later than June 30, 2023.
A deadly early morning fire in Logan Square. Firefighters and paramedics responded to the fire at 1813 North Sawyer around 5:45 this morning. The Chicago Fire Department says 1 person was killed and a firefighter was taken to the hospital with minor injuries. WGN reports the man who was killed was in his 70s and the firefighter was injured while falling off a ladder. Fire Department says that firefighter is expected to make a full recovery.
The Chicago police officers found not guilty of aggravated battery and official misconduct after shooting an unarmed man at a red line station in 2020. Cook County Judge Joseph Claps issued the verdict in the bench trial of Officer Melvina Bogard. Bogard was charged last year with the non-fatal shooting of Ariel Roman inside the Grand Red Line station. Body camera footage released by the Civilian Office of Police Accountability and other witness video shows 2 officers, Bogard and her partner Bernard Butler, struggling with Roman at the base of a staircase inside the station. Despite the acquittal, Police Superintendent David Brown has moved to fire both officers. Brown says he respects the court but stood by his decision.
We thought that it was quite appropriate to separate the officer from police department based on the violations identified by COPA.
Chicago's top doctor gets the latest COVID booster shot. While the booster became available around Labor Day, Dr. Allison Arwady says she delayed getting the shot after contracting COVID in August. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says that you can wait up to 3 months after having COVID before getting the booster. While getting that shot, Arwady touted the progress that's been made in fighting the virus.
It doesn't hurt. At the worst, it was actually at the beginning, more than 50 Chicagoans a day dying of COVID-19. Today, that's less than 1 per day. The main reason we have made that progress is COVID-19 vaccines. They are safe, they are effective, but it's important that you stay up to date.
Coming up in the program, Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia on entering the race for mayor.
But up next, could a potential rail worker strike derail the nation's economy? Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Just as the holiday season is getting underway in earnest, a potential strike by freight railroad workers stands to possibly derail things. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. And Amanda, what is this dispute?
Yeah, Brandis, the standoff between railroad companies and a dozen rail unions, those representing everyone from conductors to locomotive engineers, is about to reach a fork in the road, or perhaps maybe a turn in the tracks is a more appropriate term. Either way, it's not for the first time. In September, unions were on the precipice of striking, but then a White House board got involved and hammered out a tentative deal. There's good reason to call it tentative. A handful of unions have voted to reject that deal, even though 8 other unions are on board with it. Not enough. If one union decides to strike, the others will not cross the picket line. So if it comes to that, it would cause wide disruptions.
It would affect all walks of life as we know it, regardless of the sector that we are involved in. It could affect day-to-day operations. It could affect families. It could affect industries. It could affect any different sector that you can think of.
If we had a real rail strike like you see strikes in other industries, it would not take very long, maybe a day and a half, before auto plants, which are trying to catch up to demand, would have to scale back because they wouldn't be getting parts. Steel wouldn't be getting coking coal. And farmers' goods, especially with a very dry Mississippi River, would not be heading towards, the appropriate silos or down to the Gulf Coast for export.
Railroads are a lifeline for moving raw materials as well as finished goods. Longtime rail analyst Anthony Hatch says Chicago's a key hub. Hatch says it's the very clothes on his body at some point probably came through Chicago on a train before heading to him in New York.
This sweater I'm wearing, likely came from abroad, could have been Southeast Asia in a container to a store, of which, the entire North American journey was 90% rail and the last 10% was trucked to the store on Madison Avenue.
Of course, Amanda, though, with Christmas and Hanukkah coming up, it is high shopping season. What could a strike mean for holiday shopping?
High shopping season. You and I don't care at all about that.
Inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah. I talked with Gregory DeYoung. He used to work in logistics and supply management, and now he's in operations management at Southern Illinois University, where he works as an associate professor. Now, he says that most big box stores learned their lessons during the pandemic. They've stocked up in case of potential disruptions.
So in fact, for the Christmas shopping season, the stores are pretty well stocked and the products are on the shelf. So if you're planning on doing your Christmas shopping in person, other than it's getting late, you better get going. It's not a bad situation. If you do a lot of shopping online, the longer you wait, the closer we get to a situation where there could be a disruption, could be a problem.
Of course, there's another potential impact. Not on packages, but on passengers. He says even the threat of a strike could cause Amtrak to cancel service, as it preemptively did in the fall.
Because the railways don't want to strand their passengers. So you can't put a bunch of people on a train and send them out to California and halfway there have a railway strike, strand them in the middle of Utah. That's not a good situation. It's bad enough to strand products. It's really bad to strand people.
I reached out to Amtrak, which didn't have much to say. A spokesperson did send a statement pointing out that this is a dispute between freight companies and workers. The negotiations do not involve Amtrak nor its workforce. Now, as for if this could lead to service disruptions, the company would only say Amtrak continues to monitor ongoing freight rail management labor contract relations.
And Amanda, how likely is a strike? What's at stake?
I'll start with the latter there. The tentative deal gave rail workers a double-digit pay boost, 24% over the life of the contract, as well as a retroactive pay bump. But the people that I talked with say that with inflation at nearly 8%, that's not really as great of a raise as it may appear. And it's not just about money. Workers are also demanding less strict sick leave policies, and they don't want to have to constantly be on call. That's an issue that gets back to layoffs earlier in the pandemic that have caused a worker shortage now.
The reality is that they need that workforce. And in order to bring them back, they need to woo them back. And then it's not so easy because the workers that have been let go have gone on to other things. And so it's so difficult to bring that trained workforce back. And that's where the rub lies.
Rail analyst Hatch says the timing couldn't be better for labor. With widespread wage inflation, worker shortages, high-profile supply chain pressures, and Washington controlled by Democrats, he says unions have the upper hand, but control of the U.S. House will soon flip. And Hatch says if workers pursue a stoppage, real workers, they might have been seen as heroes, they would then be perceived as villains. He says negotiations are all about pressure, so both sides are waiting until the last minute. And SIU's DeYoung says there's really no comparison for something like this.
This will be like last time. Well, last time was 1992, so there was no internet, there was no Amazon, there was no global economy that we see today. So it's totally different in terms of what could happen. That being said, I think the chances of an actual strike are fairly low.
He is not alone in that thought. Everyone that I spoke with for this story said they predict there will not be a work stoppage by unions. Likewise, they don't predict a lockout by rail companies, and that's in part because Congress could get involved and ensure that the railroads keep on running, but also because the stakes are so high and the economic disruption would be so severe. And Brandis, the rough deadline for all of this is early December.
Okay, early December. A lot of fingers crossed in the meantime. Amanda, thank you.
Thank you.
And now to Paris and the latest candidate to enter the race for mayor, for Chicago mayor. Paris.
Brandis, thanks very much. Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia endorsed Mayor Lori Lightfoot 4 years ago when he decided not to run for mayor. That's after he pushed Rahm Emanuel to a first-ever mayoral runoff in 2015. But now Garcia is the latest to join a long and wide-ranging list of mayoral candidates vying to deny Lightfoot a second term. Garcia is a familiar face to many, being the only candidate to have served in government at nearly all levels during his nearly half-century career in Illinois politics. And here to discuss his candidacy and campaign is Jesus Chuy Garcia. Congressman Garcia, good to have you back here on Chicago Tonight.
Great to join you in your new studio.
And it's good to just have people in person. So 4 years ago, as we mentioned, you endorsed Lightfoot for mayor. Why now do you want to make her a one-term mayor?
I believe that Chicago needs new leadership that can bring people together, someone who is rooted in the Chicago experience, knows the neighborhoods, understands people's realities, and someone who can unite the people of Chicago. I think that my history as an organizer, as an advocate, as a community builder, someone who has held various offices, all levels of office virtually, and someone who has helped bring about new leadership and help them get elected at the local, state, and federal level is the type of unifying leadership that Chicago needs in these times. People feel unsafe, and in order to make that reality change, you need someone who's going to be collaborative and not combative and exhibiting that type of conflict unnecessarily, constantly.
And we should mention that you announced your campaign 40 years to the day of Harold Washington's campaign, which you were a part of. So are you saying that Lightfoot has been combative, has not been collaborative?
Yes, and there are few results to show for an increase, a significant increase in the city budget. Chicago is known for the combativeness that's been on full exhibit now because of the transmission of the council meetings, petty fights, the texting, on and on. She has not been a unifier and the type of leader that we need to come out of the pandemic and to make Chicago a thriving city with thriving neighborhoods.
As the second time you're going for this job, 2015, you pushed Rahm Emanuel to a runoff. Is there anything you learned from that campaign you might do differently now?
Oh, absolutely. I learned that taking care of business in the U.S. Congress is good for the city of Chicago. I'm very proud to be a part of this Congress, which delivered pandemic relief, stimulus checks. We provided assistance to the state of Illinois. I think we kept the country from dipping into a recession or worse than that. Without the support that we've sent Chicago and the state of Illinois, our economy would be in a much dire situation. I want to come back home to Chicago to ensure that the resources that we've provided Chicago through the Infrastructure and Jobs Investment Act, through the chips and the manufacturing that is coming back onshore in America, and then the investment in greening up of our technology and our systems across America, great workforce opportunities, the creation of new jobs, and essentially thrusting Chicago into the 21st century as a global city.
So this is part of your work in Congress, and I assume
Yes.
you probably want to have close relationships with Congress. Were you to be elected mayor, you've built quite a political machine on the South Side. 4 years ago, you surprised the political world when you endorsed Mike Madigan for Democratic Party chair. As we know, 4 years later, he is facing more than 20 counts of federal corruption charges. Do you regret making that endorsement?
In 2016, Bruce Rauner was governor of the state of Illinois, trying to make the state a right-to-work state, opposing an increase in the minimum wage, taking anti-worker positions. I was asked by labor leaders in Illinois to support a challenger from the right. I did so. I don't have regrets about that. It was important for organized labor to protect workers in Illinois. That was the motivation.
4 years later, are you surprised by these charges? Because a lot of folks knew the way Madigan ran his organization.
I was surprised by the charges. We all know that there was a great political organization with a lot of power that was wielded across the state of Illinois. I didn't know the depths of the practices that were going on that led to the indictments.
All right, I have to ask you this. In Congress, you've gotten reportedly around $200,000 in donations from a PAC that's funded by the disgraced FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried in the whole crypto world. You've also gotten a small direct contribution from him. What do you believe his interest was in your campaign?
One of the things that I read that he favored was COVID pandemic preparedness. That may have been a way for him to try to woo several members of Congress. The support that was provided was in the form of an independent expenditure. We had no control, no coordination, no knowledge of it until we saw that it was taking place in the district. The $2,500 were returned and given to a charity. This was his individual
contribution to
exactly.
You return that.
Yes.
And you also serve on the House Financial Service Committee, the Digital Asset Working Group. So ostensibly, you're charged in this group with coming up with potential crypto regulations. Do you think that factored into his interest in your campaign?
I don't know, but what I do know is that I have a strong history of being very skeptical about cryptocurrencies. I think they ought to be regulated very closely. I've been a fierce advocate on that. I have suggested that to the regulatory agencies that come before us periodically to report. I care about the financial system, protecting it, and ensuring
given what folks are going through now with this company.
This is what we were warning for the past 2.5 years in the Financial Services Committee, and unfortunately, one more example of shady characters operating without regulation. This is why we need firm regulations.
All right, we're going to ask some of your colleagues on this a bit later in the show. I got to get to city issues. Chicago's already recorded more than 600 homicides this year. It's down from last year, but still up from 3 years ago. What will you do differently in the realm of public safety?
The Chicago Police Department is in shambles, in part because of the failure of Superintendent Brown. I don't think he's cut the mustard. I think the mayor has been reluctant to admit that he hasn't been effective. We need a new police superintendent. We need new leadership and leadership within the Chicago Police Department. The morale needs to be improved, but we also need urgently, and I think it comes with new leadership, to reduce the unsolved homicide rates in Chicago. We need to ensure that we reduce dramatically the carjackings and the armed robberies that are taking place, make our transit systems safer. All of that will happen. I think the resources are within the allocated budget, almost $2 billion, the single largest outlay of resources. They need to be utilized properly.
So you would keep that budget the same? I mean,
the budget, yeah, and the budget has resources that can be used to provide mental health services to community residents, to police officers as well, and to training on constitutional policing and community policing. There's a great opportunity here to rebuild trust with community residents and police officers, but it requires new leadership and a modernization of the department. That is what I'm prepared to do because I'm a lifelong Chicagoan.
You are, and you're a lifelong resident of Little Village. I have to ask you, though, you got all these progressive groups to support you 4 years ago. They now cast their lot with, 8 years ago, I should say, with Brandon Johnson, CTU, SEIU. Is that going to be an impediment to getting progressive voters out for you now that they have all that union support?
Look, I wish I had every progressive organization endorse me. The reality is that they undertook an early endorsement process. I did not participate because I wasn't a candidate. Very tough decision to make. I only came to that decision and I clarified that I would not risk a possible tight House majority, that I would not run for mayor if that happened. So I had to wait until we saw how Congress shaped out. So they undertook a process that was early. You'll have to ask them about that. But I believe that I am the most viable candidate to defeat Lori Lightfoot in a showdown next year. I am appealing to voters across Chicagoland. I am viable. Polling has demonstrated that. I come a lot more prepared than 8 years ago. And I want to put the resources that we have designated for Chicago and for Illinois to ensure that the city bounces back, that the city turns the corner, that it becomes safer, and that we have thriving neighborhoods as well as a central business district.
Certainly a crucial time for the city. Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia, thank you for joining us. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank you. Likewise.
And up next, we check in with some local members of Congress, Congressman Garcia's colleagues, and their analysis of the midterm election and more. So please stay with us.
Our culture is vibrant, it's rich, it's fun.
We try to focus on, hey, let me help you. This is what Chicago is. This is Little Village.
Days are numbered for Democrats in the House majority. Lame duck session is underway before a slim GOP majority takes over in January. And Democrats will go forward next term without Speaker Nancy Pelosi in leadership as she announced her intention to step back.
I will not seek re-election to Democratic leadership in the next Congress. For me, the hours come for a new generation to lead the Democratic caucus that I so deeply respect.
And here to talk about that and much more are Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, a Democrat from Evanston, Congressman Mike Quigley, a Democrat from Chicago's North Side, and Congressman Rodney Davis, a Republican from downstate Taylorville. Welcome all of you here, both in person and virtual. Congresswoman Schakowsky, you saw Speaker Pelosi there announcing her intention to step down as Speaker next term. You've been part of her leadership team for a long time. Do you intend to stay on in leadership, or will you step down as well?
Well, there's certainly less leadership positions right now, but I'm looking forward to my committee work and hopefully staying as a deputy whip in the House of Representatives. It's really kind of the end of an era. I think Nancy Pelosi will go down in history as perhaps the most effective head of our leadership team, and she's just has been an incredible person.
So it sounds like you do want to stay around in leadership in a senior position.
And she's going to stay around, representing her own district.
Right. She is staying on as a congresswoman, just not in leadership. Yeah. Congressman Quigley, Hakeem Jeffries, a representative from New York, has made the rounds as a candidate for that position. Is he who you're supporting, and is he who you ultimately think will get that job?
He is, and he will. I don't, what I see now is there are three people running in sort of a loose alliance, Aguilar, Clark, to join Hakeem, and I suspect they will be the three top leadership team for the Democrats.
And Congressman Davis, we mentioned that Republicans are going to have a small majority, maybe 6 or 7 seats. You are leaving after this session, so you won't be there for that. But Kevin McCarthy, is he the guy that's going to have the votes to become the next Speaker of the House?
Absolutely. Kevin McCarthy is the best person to lead our conference and to be the Speaker of the House. It's a slim majority, but the Democrats right now have a pretty slim majority. And, I'm excited to kind of see the opportunity to get some more bipartisanship when it comes to legislating. We haven't seen that with the Democrats' slim majority, and I'm cautiously optimistic that our Republicans who want to govern will be able to take a leadership role.
Although Congressman Davis, McCarthy has talked about several investigations he wants to launch into President Biden, into the border, into Afghanistan, into Hunter Biden. Are those things that you think he should go forward with?
Well, why wouldn't we want to exercise our oversight responsibilities? The Democrats being in charge of the House have actually run away from some of the responsibilities for the issues that you just mentioned. part of the reason of being in the majority is holding the executive branch accountable and making sure that we get answers to the questions that many Americans are asking about all of those subjects and issues you just mentioned.
And speaking of oversight, Congresswoman Schakowsky, the Supreme Court just ruled this afternoon that Donald Trump has to turn over his tax records to the House committee. Although the GOP, as we mentioned many times, is set to take control in about 6 weeks, will this be enough time for House Democrats to do anything with these tax returns?
Well, you know, I certainly hope so. But I want to tell you that I think if the Republicans want to focus primarily on investigations, I think that is why there was no red wave, because what American people want is themselves to be at the center of the agenda for the Republicans and for the Democrats. How are you going to make my life better now? Not how are you going to continue to hammer away at some investigations that I think are not of interest to the American people.
And we'll see how that dynamic plays out. But I do want to get to some issues at play in this lame duck session. Congressman Quigley, Senator Durbin says he's trying to corral some GOP Senate votes to pass a DACA bill for the so-called Dreamers. Do you think that that's going to have support in the Senate to get past the filibuster? And will it pass the House?
You know, it's passed the House. If it's modified, it will pass the House again under current Democratic control. I have every faith in Senator Durbin's ability, and there are others that are leading the charge here. But look, this is something we have to do, protect those who know no other home than the United States of America. And it reminds us that what we really need to do is pass comprehensive immigration reform. It's the smart thing to do, and it's the right thing to do.
Congressman Davis, is that a realistic goal for this lame duck session? Are there Republican votes for some kind of massive immigration reform package that might include border security and a pathway to residency for DACA recipients?
Look, we've had plenty of opportunities to vote for packages just as recently as 2018 that would have built a border wall. It would have actually fixed our DACA issues that Congressman Quigley just mentioned, that Senator Durbin is trying to address right now. It would have addressed some long-term institutional problems with our immigration system. But we got 0 Democrats to support either of those bills. And unfortunately, we didn't get enough Republicans to do so either. I'm on record of supporting fixes to our DACA program. But to think that this is going to get fixed in the lame duck session is probably shooting at stars right now. Unfortunately, immigration has been the issue that both sides have taken on as a political issue. And unfortunately, there are hundreds of thousands of people in this country that are being affected by the politics of the day, rather than actually coming up with common sense solutions like I voted for my entire time in Congress.
Congresswoman Schakowsky, is it too much to think that there could be some kind of immigration bill in this lame duck session or a DACA bill in the Senate?
Well, I'm certainly hoping that we're going to be able finally, Senator Durbin's been working on it for over 20 years. And these are young people. This is their country. If we can get a pathway to citizenship for them so that they can be secure, that they're not going to be victims of any kind of deportation or any kind of negativity, I'm hoping that we can all agree on that. It's a small part of what is the need for a massive, I think, immigration reform. That's not going to happen this time, but DACA should.
Congressman Quigley, President Biden is asking for a massive new sum of money in aid to go to Ukraine, $37 billion to be exact. Is there support in Congress for that number, that amount?
Look, so far so good. It's been a challenge, but every request that has been made so far has passed. Obviously, we'd like to get it passed in this omnibus, this funding bill, which will pass the House before the December 16th deadline. I'd like to think we'd get this done so that it takes us through much of the next fiscal year. So as Congress changes, the House changes hands, we don't have to worry about a transition where there's a gap in funding, now more than ever. I mean, Ukraine has turned the tide in this conflict. The last thing we need to do now is to hold them in the lurch while they're winning this war.
Another item, Congressman Davis, the Electoral Vote Count Act that, among other things, would codify that the vice president does not have any role other than ceremonial in choosing the next president. That is, of course, up to the voters. Is this something that you would support and might have bipartisan support?
Well, I think if the Senate bill comes over to the House, it's much more likely to get sent to the president's desk. Unfortunately, the Democrats in the House decided to push their own version of the Electoral Count Act, and it was one that went way too far. It basically, unfortunately, continued the process that I've been fighting against from House Democrats, and really has led to the opportunity to make sure that we stop them from nationalizing our election systems. We do a great job here in Illinois of making sure that our elections are secure. We do a great job of making sure that decisions are made at the local level. I was on the House floor on January 6th when we finished that vote as one of the counters with Vice President Pence. And I agree, no vice president. And I certainly don't want Vice President Harris picking the next president of the United States. We need to do something.
So some differences between the parties on this bill. Congresswoman Schakowsky, I have to bring up the social media and cryptocurrency because these things are in the news right now. First with FTX going down, owing billions to creditors, and Sam Bankman-Fried, a prominent Democratic donor, in a lot of trouble right now. Is there any kind of consensus on regulation of this industry?
I think it is certainly worth looking at, that's for sure, and I think that we may be able to get some bipartisan support on that as well. I have been the chair, am right now, of the Consumer Protection Subcommittee, and these are the kinds of issues where we've actually been able to come together, so I'm hoping we could move forward.
Congressman, quickly, what kind of regulation do you think should be proposed for the crypto industry, which is obviously having a lot of trouble right now?
Sure. And look, the reason for this is innocent investors are losing their money. We regulate most of the financial industry for a reason, for past sins. When something new comes along like crypto and it's unregulated, it exposes those investors to this kind of risk. So look, I think the legislative process knows how to handle it. Let's hold hearings and find out exactly what we need to do, bring the experts in, and pass thoughtful, meaningful legislation.
It doesn't sound like anything specific at this point. Congressman Davis, you also have these issues with Twitter, Elon Musk. We don't know exactly what he's going to do in terms of moderating Twitter. What kind of regulation do you think should be proposed for social media like Twitter?
Look, I love to watch liberals pee their pants right now because Elon Musk is actually allowing free speech. We're not seeing moderation by people who have been in Silicon Valley and who subscribe to a political theory that most of America doesn't subscribe to. When you talk about cryptocurrency, many in that industry have been begging for a regulatory regime. And unfortunately, Congress has been paralyzed and has done nothing. And now we've seen the impact of that inaction. I hope that the CFTC, working with other investment agencies and places like the CME, can help come up with that regulatory regime that will ensure that innocent Americans don't have their lifetime savings taken away by bad investments like we've seen right now with FTX.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us. Congressman Mike Quigley, Congressman Rodney Davis, Congressman Jan Schakowsky. Thanks so much. And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, there are people caught in the middle of the battle over immigration policies. Asylum seekers fleeing their home countries. Thousands of migrants have arrived in Chicago from the Texas border since August. The city has been providing medical care and connecting them with shelters, but there's still a long road ahead. Joanna Hernandez spoke with mothers and grandmothers who say they're searching for better opportunities.
On a cold Chicago day, we met two women outside a shelter in Humboldt Park. It's the first time they've seen a glimpse of snow.
Y algo sorprendente realmente, mis hijos, bueno, no les importó jugar con esos, mojarse ni sentir el frío.
Franculi Cañizales says she traveled through the jungle with her two young children. Her 10-year-old son tells us about their journey from Venezuela.
Barro, río, cada rato pasando río hondo, río llano, pasando así con corriente. A veces uno lo llevaba, a veces no. A veces uno se iba por una montaña con esa barrera, tú te caías y ya morías.
It's been a month since they arrived in Chicago on a bus. The mother of 4 had to leave behind 2 of her other children. Now grateful to have a roof over her head, she says she's eager to work.
Hay buenos corazones dentro de esos refugios, que es lo importante, ¿sí me entiende? Y pues, pero en el caso del trabajo es difícil porque uno está acostumbrado a labrar, a tener trabajo, ¿sí me entiende? A tener un trabajo, al decir yo estoy trabajando.
Cañizales owned a small ranch in Venezuela and struggled to provide for her children as the country deals with an economic crisis. She says her goal is to give her kids a shot at a better education.
Feliz porque ya voy a tener mi vida tranquila, estudiar, ser alguien en la vida cuando sea grande.
¿Qué quieres hacer?
¿Policía o futbolista?
¡Policía! 50-year-old Alicia Pantuña also made the dangerous trip. She came from Ecuador with her grandson.
Por la selva, 7 días en la selva, con hambre, picada de moscos, picada de todo, y ríos, soles.
Pantuña tells us she ran a vegetable stand in her homeland, but the violence and corruption were making it hard to survive.
Pero gracias también al gobierno porque nos da de comer y nos da un techo también, gracias, se le agradece también, pero nosotros queremos de nuestro sudor, queremos lograr las cosas, pero con nuestra alma, porque nosotros venimos con todo el alma para trabajar y ser alguien en la vida y darle un buen futuro a los niños.
At a hotel in Skokie, another group of migrants is receiving shelter. A mother of 6 who didn't want to be shown on camera shares what her 2-month journey was like.
Llegamos allá a Tapachula, en Tapachula nos robaron, nos quitaron todo. De ahí tuvimos que buscar tren.
Yo pensaba que ya era finalmente.
Exactamente, ya pensando que ya no llegábamos ya. Buscamos el tren porque escuchamos del tren y nos montamos en el tren.
The 40-year-old mother is hoping to get a work visa soon and one day be able to reconnect with her children in Venezuela.
Me dice, mami, cuando viene te extraño, yo también le extraño, pero estamos aquí a un propósito de darle lo mejor.
¿Y qué es lo que espera en el futuro?
En el futuro, no, aquí lo que espero es comprarle su cosa, por lo menos uno viene por un futuro de su casa, de tener sus cosas en Venezuela.
Despite the struggles and uncertainty of what lies ahead, these women say they are driven by the chance of a new beginning.
Y a nuestras metas, a llegar a nuestras metas y para poder ser alguien en nuestro país. Eso es lo único que queremos, señorita. Nada más, y que sigan adelante y creer en Dios. Siempre es el único Dios el que nos va a salvar de todo esto, nada más.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
With stories, the city is asking for donations of new clothing items and hygiene products. If you're interested in donating, you can find a list of drop-off locations on our website. Now, Paris, we toss it back to you.
Prentice, thanks. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, a new lawsuit targets some dry shampoos that have been found to carry carcinogens. We hear details about the case. And a growing number of families face food insecurity as costs rise, how pantries and food banks are dealing with increased demand. But first, some more of today's top stories. A new program is being launched at Cook County Jail to prevent fatal overdoses. The Chicago Department of Public Health and the Illinois Department of Human Services are partnering with the Cook County Sheriff's Office to provide harm reduction kits to everyone leaving the jail. Fentanyl test strips are included in the kits, as is Narcan, which can reverse the effects of an opioid overdose. CDPH says people who have been recently released from incarceration are 40 to 120 times more likely to die from an overdose than the general population. And speaking of, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul and 13 other attorneys general today announced a $6 billion settlement with opioid makers Teva and Allergan for their role in fueling the opioid crisis. In 2021, more than 107,000 people died from overdoses in the U.S., including 1,400 here in Chicago. And a farewell for Dr. Anthony Fauci, who led the nation's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In what is expected to be his final White House press conference before retiring next month, Fauci said he gave the job his all.
I'll let other people judge the value or not of my accomplishments, but what I would like people to remember about what I've done is that every day for all of those years, I've given it everything that I have, and I've never left anything on the field.
And Fauci also reminded people to get that latest COVID booster dose. Warning for parents against purchasing dangerous toys for their children this holiday season. The annual Trouble in Toyland report from Illinois PIRG found many dangerous toys that have been recalled are still being sold by mainstream retailers. Illinois PIRG says it was able to purchase more than 30 recalled toys from U.S.-based online sellers last month, despite it being illegal to sell them. And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, thank you. If you use dry shampoo to keep your hair fresh between wash days, you may want to check the brand. A number of them have been recalled over high levels of a cancer-causing chemical, benzene, which has been linked to leukemia and other blood disorders. But a class action lawsuit says the company that makes the products, Unilever, that they knew about the toxic chemical long before the recall. Here with more on the chemical and how it works is Dr. June McCoy, professor of medicine at Northwestern University School of Medicine. Dr. McCoy, welcome back. First, what's your reaction to this? What's your reaction to this report?
I am not really surprised, given the fact that we know that benzene is a toxic, a carcinogenic agent. It's always been known that this is a dangerous drug, and I cannot believe that Unilever can say that they were not aware of it. So they knew or should have known, because the public knows benzene at this point is dangerous.
What else do we know about benzene and how it can lead to cancer?
So benzene is pretty much in a lot of products. It's part, maybe one of the top 20 substances in many products around. You'll find it in gasoline when you're pumping your gas. So we ask that you turn your face away and not inhale the fumes. It's in shampoos and other products. It's in pesticides. It's in the workplace. So it's pretty much available or known to be in many environmental situations. And we know that what benzene does is that it can get into the bone marrow, the soft portion of the bones where blood cells are made, and it can actually change the genetic makeup of the bone marrow. So it actually changes the DNA of the bone marrow. That change is what can lead to leukemia. And I think the case is all about the risk of leukemia being very great in persons using benzene-infused products.
Now, we should mention, of course, the report that found this benzene did not find it in all dry shampoos, just those made by Dove, Nexus, Suave, TG, which makes Rockaholic and Bedhead, and Tresemme. But Dr. McCoy, how could this chemical or any others like it, how could they have even made it into a product that makes its way onto store shelves and onto the market and all the other products that you mentioned that it can be found in?
And that's what's concerning, that it not only got into the product, into those particular products, but got into those products at a level that has proven to be harmful to consumers. It had to have been intentionally placed within the product. And I'm not so sure of how much they're regulating the amount of benzene, because it's pretty much found in many, many areas, in many, many places. So for it to be in the product, those dry shampoos at that degree means that the company was aware of what they were doing.
It sounds like it's concerning for you as a professional. Do you think this class action lawsuit has standing?
I think it has standing, and it has standing on so many grounds. Again, as I said before, the company should have known, either knew or should have known, and I think certainly the former seems to be what might have happened. The second thing is that the company was given warning from back in, I think, early 2021, that there were concerns about this product, and the company did not take enough steps to pull the product from the market. So failure to warn, failure to actually pull the product from the market early enough, exposed people who would normally not have been exposed from that period of time when they claimed that they were made aware of it. Place those people at harm, quite great harm, because leukemia, acute leukemia, can be a deadly diagnosis for people who are diagnosed by physicians with that condition.
What's your advice, Dr. McCoy, to people who have or have been using these products? Should they be alarmed if they find they've got these particular brand name bottles of dry shampoo in their cabinet?
I would be alarmed and I would go to my doctor and try to get tested to see what's going on with my blood count, my red blood count, my white blood count, and my clotting count or my platelets. I would recommend that they stop using the product. I would not throw it away. I would actually pack those products and keep them, because you might need to take those as proof that you were using these particular products to an attorney who might be handling your case.
What does this say, Dr. McCoy? Because we've talked about this before, specifically the link to uterine cancer and hair relaxers that black women use mostly. What does it say? Or what are you thinking about, like the amount of toxic chemicals that can be found in beauty products?
I am thinking that we need stronger regulations by the Food and Drug Administration, by the FTC, by OSHA, the agency that looks at environmental safety in certain environmental areas. I think we need better federal regulations of these products. It's concerning to me that after last interview, I'm here talking about another product, a known carcinogen, and talking about the risk to so many women out there who are trusting that when they go to the supermarket and buy a product with a brand name on it, that they're going to be safe. That's very concerning.
Okay. Dr. June McCoy, thanks as always for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Up next, demand at local food pantries ahead of Thanksgiving. But first, a look at the weather. And if you've already done your shopping, you might have noticed the cost of Thanksgiving dinner has gone up this year by about 13%, in part because of inflation. For families already stretching to make ends meet, this means seeking help from local food pantries, many of which are reporting a significant increase in demand. Joining us to talk about how they're managing the greater need are Kate Mayer, Executive Director and CEO of the Greater Chicago Food Depository, Michelle Zurikowski, Chief Executive Officer of Beyond Hunger, and Margaret O'Connor, Executive Director of Common Pantry. Thanks to the three of you for joining us. Welcome back. Kate Mayer, starting with you, please. How would you describe the amount of need that you're seeing this year compared to the pandemic and even pre-pandemic?
You know what, Brandis, it's sobering. We are up again over last year. And so when we look at October of 2022 compared to October 2021, we're up about 20%. And when we look back to where we are compared to pre-pandemic, it's more than 30% increase in the number of households who are turning to food pantries all across Cook County.
Michelle, I'm going to ask you the same question. How would you describe the amount of need that you're seeing?
Yeah, we are up 40% actually over last year. And that's been true since about March, really when the gasoline prices started to go up. That's when we really started to see big increases.
Margaret?
We're really, first of all, excited to be here to talk about Common Pantry. Thank you. We, as October 2022, up 74% at Common Pantry. We really have exploded, and it's, again, I think that's a great word, sobering. I couldn't have thought of a better way to say it.
74% year over
last year. From last October.
Margaret, what would you say are the factors that are driving this increase?
Certainly inflation. Yeah, and I think, frankly, we're a really well-received pantry with a vast array of fresh fruits and vegetables, and we really just try our best to feed people what they want. And Client Choice came back in the fold a year ago, August. So we've just been trying to fill that need, and it's incredible.
Michelle, have donations been keeping up with the demand?
No, not really. They haven't. Our financial donations are down slightly, not hugely. Of course, they were really elevated during pandemic, and the in-kind donations haven't hit those pre-pandemic levels either. So they're down.
Kate, how did you prepare for this demand? Did you see it coming, sort of?
Well, not really. I mean, I think we have at every turn over the last 3 years, we've been hopeful that we were sort of in the worst moment and things were going to get better. And I don't think any of us really anticipated that 3 years after the emergency went into effect that we would find ourselves talking about the numbers that we are. But what we're seeing is this just all of these things happening at one time. We still had high need. We still had people whose lives had been turned upside down by the pandemic. And then you add inflation. and it is having a huge impact, particularly on families with children. And then, of course, for food banks all across this country, we're having to buy food and we're having to pay much more for the food. So at the Food Depository, we're paying $1 million more for food this year and getting less than we did last year at this time.
Margaret, what are you hearing from the families? What are you hearing that they need the most? What are you hearing from them?
Well, we are doing our best to fill the, cultural and, the need that people have for food that they want, and that's what we're really hearing. They're struggling. We are also up 36% mid-year. We just added to our budget, and we're purchasing 36% more food than we anticipated. So our budgets have gone up for food, and we're meeting that need because people are really, they're just really struggling. So.
Michelle, same question to you. What are you hearing from families that they need?
Protein, pretty much. Like the really expensive things that we struggle with too when we go to the grocery store, right? So meat and other protein products, fresh produce. Those are the things that people want the most.
How do you manage all of that, when the demand changes around the holidays, right? Does it change?
It does. Cold storage. I could go into a whole thing about the challenges of cold storage. We actually were very lucky to have a funder who provided us with enough money to get turkeys for every single person that came during the month of November. So that's been incredible. But where to store them has been a challenge. I mean, we were really lucky last week was so cold. So the truck could come unload the turkeys. They could just sit in the parking lot and we could just give them out. So tomorrow we're not quite sure. We'll figure it out.
It'll be a little bit warmer tomorrow.
We'll figure it out.
What to do with the birds, right? Kate, we often, over these last couple of years especially, we've learned that, families with children, families of color experiencing greater food insecurity. Is that still the case?
Absolutely, and it's getting worse. So today we know that 37% of African American households with children in our community are food insecure. That is astonishing, and it really has me nervous about what's ahead of us.
How can those communities be better supported?
I think there's a lot of work that we have to do, first of all, just talking about equity and identifying that food insecurity is a symptom of poverty, and we have to talk about why people are struggling so much in this community and frankly in communities all across the country. But there's also a whole host of policy changes that we need to see happening. We have a farm bill coming up in the year ahead that's going to be super important as we talk about how do we drive change that can ensure people have access to quality, nutritious food.
Michelle, your organization, you've done something a little bit different, better to support the immigrant families that you work with. Tell me about that.
Yeah, we developed a pop-up pantry that is looking at a particularly suburban immigrant population. One of the barriers that we were finding for folks was the having to provide identifying information that was real personal, which is a requirement for a lot of food pantries. So we privately fund this one so people don't have to do that. And so we text message them, this group of people, and let them know where the secret place is where they can come pick up the food. And so that really alleviates a lot of that barrier.
Margaret, from your perspective, what more can be done to support families and communities that need help?
Well, first of all, I think if you've never really volunteered or experienced food insecurity yourself, that's one intersection that would be really important, just examining opportunities throughout the city and Cook County to volunteer. Certainly for us, we provide hot meals, emergency food distribution, of course, but then we also have holiday meals. So you can access the ways that you can help us, especially through the holidays, by going to our website and figuring out the various ways that you can help. $50, we are partnering with local Jewel food stores in our area, and $50 can supply a whole holiday meal for families.
And that's an important point, giving your time, not just your money. Same question to each of you in the little bit of time that we've got. Margaret, Michelle, how can folks help?
Yes, we usually say volunteer, donate, advocate. Those are the things. I'm really glad that Kate mentioned the policies that are coming up, because one of the things that we did see in COVID, while there was really high food insecurity at first, the programs that were put in place to support people really decreased poverty and food insecurity The most significantly that I've seen it in the 20 years that I've been in this work. So I'd say advocate.
Yeah. Kate, about 20 seconds left. What has you worried as we head into the holidays and the winter months?
There are still headwinds. The winter is traditionally a really difficult time for families who have to make trade-offs about paying for heat, paying for rent, paying for food, and we know food prices are going to continue to be high.
Okay. Thanks to the three of you for joining us and for the work that you do. Kate Mayer, Michelle Zurikowski, and Margaret O'Connor. Thanks to all of you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Tuesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. You can also get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. With an upcoming federal trial, what is next for outgoing Alderman Carrie Austin? Our Spotlight Politics team weighs in.
And pediatric ICUs in Illinois are at critical levels because of RSV and flu cases. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.